Hold up.
Welcome back, everyone, to Nerdette's Newsstand, and as promised, we are going to go over some of the source material related to Matt Reeves' The Batman coming out in March. And first off, I am excited to have award-winning editor Joe Corallo with me to go over Ego. How are you this morning, Joe?
I'm all right, Tristan. How are you?
I am doing good. I absolutely love Darwyn Cooke, and I think this is such a great representation of not only him as an artist, because we can look at the work he's done as an artist, but just how phenomenal he brings every single time he writes a story. And this one is so different. I love the Sigmund Freud aspect, looking into the ego and everything else, and all of the weird I don't know how to say it. All of the weird nuances with him, Batman, maybe being psychotic, maybe not, and then kind of going towards the end. But we're going to go over the entire story. So if you guys are new to the channel, of course, you know what to do. It subscribe, hit like, leave me a comment down below. And of course, like I said, this is Ego. And this is written and drawn by Darwyn Cooke. Now, there is actually two different versions I'll put in the description. One is a deluxe edition that has other tales with it and shoots up in price about 4 times the amount. And then you have the regular version that's pretty affordable, but it is also lettered by Jonathan Babcock. But everything else in this story is done by Darwyn Cooke. So just as a kind of overview before we go into the story, Joe, tell me your meet cute with this story. How do you look at the story in terms of Batman or Bruce Wayne as a whole and how it affects his psyche?
Well, when it comes to a story like this, I think since this did come out in 2000, I feel like so many other creators since then have tried to take elements from this and use it. I would be hard pressed if Tom King, for example, never read this, or Scott Snyder even. I think a lot of people took that whole dynamic, and this is also pretty early on in people kind of toying around in that playground of, so why does he continue being Batman and stuff like that in a way that felt like elevated? I mean, this would be stuff that would come up every once in a while in the comics, but you didn't stew in it like you did in this particular story. The story kind of took it up a notch with some of the events in it that lead to that confrontation that we'll get into shortly. But, this is also, as far as I'm aware, and I am sure people in the comments will correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this was his first major comics work that got published. This is before a lot of the other stuff he had done in comics. He had been doing stuff in animation.
Right.
He did, I'm pretty sure it was in Batman Beyond. I'm pretty sure he did that, the opening animation and some other elements of that. I think maybe the logo. He was pretty involved in that, a little bit in the animated series before that. And then this was basically his first crack in published mainstream comics. He'd wanted to do comics before, but this was the story that got him into comics.
I think it's funny because I think he worked on the Joker episode of Batman the Animated Series. Mm-hmm. And this is when we get into it, but it's basically storyboarded out in this. He knew exactly what he was doing when he stepped into that animated series. And it's the art style is very, vindicative of the animated series. And I think he does a good job. And I love the cover. Well, one of the covers where you have Batman and he's basically in Gotham, but you also have it's there's so many different aspects of that. This story tells us what Gotham took for Batman, but also what Batman gives Gotham and how they're kind of always, like, for lack of a better word, betrothed to each other. And I love that cover, and it really shows it. But the only thing I have with that cover is it's an amazing cover, but we don't really explore that. We explore more of the psyche of Bruce Wayne and Batman, the dichotomy, or the different two versions of him. So I love this. Darwyn Cooke is phenomenal. He was taken way too early. He is such an amazing talent. If you've not read much by Darwyn Cooke, you definitely have to check out his other work, The New Frontier, his stuff on Before Watchmen, some of my favorite stuff. Do you have a favorite work by Darwyn Cooke before we move on?
Sure. Definitely New Frontier is up there for me. I was a big fan of Ecstatics at Marvel, and he did some villains there. Also, the Parker graphic novel adaptations he did over at IDW. Those were also very good. I actually got the chance to meet him at a con, and he signed and sketched in my New Frontier. And
that's so cool.
Yeah, so that was great. You know, I probably met him. It must have been like 2014 at New York Comic Con. He was basically in like a panel. It was just him and Paul Levitz, and Paul Levitz sort of doing a retrospective on his career, and I got to talk to him after it. But yeah, you know, I love his art style. I love a lot of those similar sort of artists you get, like, you know, the pop art style. So like the Allreds, people like that. So,
ooh, I cannot forget to mention Selena's Big Score. Definitely another one. I love it. I love Darwyn Cooke. So let's get right in the book. We basically open up, and it's a very strong opening. Like, I would say this opening is, I don't know the best way to put it. It is almost stronger than this book needs, but that's what makes it so much better. Like, Batman is given so much. And when I looked it up, I think it said, now there's a weird, like, does this take place in continuity? Does it not? And I looked it up, and it said it takes place in year 3. But then again, this is so, like, this is one of those stories that's so evergreen that it could take place, it could not. You know what I mean? Like, there's those stories that, but this one definitely seems to take place a little bit into Batman's career. We see he is working to go up against the Joker. He is, and it's clearly not his first time, right? Yeah. He's definitely gone up against this man before, and he is feeling it. Like, in every bone in his body after this chase. He is losing blood. He is starting to black out. And he is trying to figure out where to move on next. Well, we see... this is what I mean. This part is so, like... It's so demanding of your attention. We see a Joker lackey. And basically, he is kind of at his wit's end. He knows the Joker has been caught. But that doesn't matter because Joker goes into Arkham and he escapes. Or he gets, loose on a technicality. And he goes back into the city. And he knows by ratting Joker out that he is going to eventually impede his wrath. And I do like that. There was like, and I'm trying to find it right offhand. I'll put it on the name on the screen. He actually puts in a little bit of a Easter egg Darwyn Cooke does from Batman Mask of the Phantasm, and I can't remember the name. But and I like how he kind of includes that stuff. But we see this man, and he walks up on top of this bridge. And Batman thinks, oh no, he's going to kill himself. And he does catch him. And this is where it really leads to the point where it's like, look, yeah, I know Joker's going to get out again. I know he is going to do worse to me than he is than I could do to myself by killing myself. And then he takes it a step further. And he says, not only could he do worse to me, I have a family. I have a child and I have a wife. So I killed them. Like, it is shocking that, and anyone could think that, I mean, obviously costume, super villains are going to be able to do worse, but he makes it quick and easy for them as compared to maybe what the Joker could do. Now, my basic question here is, why wouldn't you just run? Go to Metropolis.
Yeah. Well, I think, this all sets up Joker as being this large threat. I think that's really, a big part of that. Like, the Joker, what he does, especially like in the underworld to his minions, is so out of the scope of what Batman, Superman, and other people handle that they're not safe. Which is, it's all interesting. His name's was it Buster Snibbs?
Yep.
And there's that great bit, the 9-panel grid on was it page 11 of you get. So what was it? It is. Let's see here. Yeah, so you get that bit where he's looking over, like he's pissed, and he's looking Batman in the eyes right when he's like talking about the, killing them himself, and seeing Batman's reaction to that, followed by, his immediate reaction being to still, after hearing that Buster Snibbs had killed his wife and kid, still attempts to save him from committing suicide.
Right.
Which again also speaks to the character of Batman. And that's when we start leaning into, some of the, flashbacks. We get, Batmobile, and we get this bit. It's just one panel of Hugo Strange. And, it's just great. For a second there, you're like, is that Hugo Strange? Because they don't tell you who it is.
Right.
They show you. And, but yeah, that is Hugo Strange, which is great because he's one of Batman's, earliest villains. And so to have him sort of talk about schizophrenia and split personality for that one panel is really great.
And he opens up the idea. Well, going back, he does save him, but then Buster, he takes his gun out and he blows his brains out right in front of Batman. And this is setting up that idea that Joker is that dangerous. Like you said, like there's nothing Batman can do because they know he doesn't kill, and they know that he's not going, it's the revolving door of Arkham. And I love looking at this, how they do it with the Batmobile, how you're looking at the speedometer and he's just going faster and faster and faster to the point where you see Buster looking at him and he just says, yeah, you see in hell, basically. Yeah. And then he stops on a dime right at the cliff, right at the edge of that cliff. And that's kind of like, I love the idea that it's setting up the whole idea of Batman from this point out is at the edge where he could, go into full, schizophrenia or something like who Hugo Strange said, or he could go straight into, Bruce Wayne. He could go back and actually do well. But I do think a lot of this story is centered a weird way around Christmas, but we get him kind of screaming right from that point. We get him screaming at his or sobbing, what he did in telling his parents and talking to them. And that's where we get introduced to Ego. And I love Ego. I think it's such a cool dichotomy between Batman and Bruce Wayne, but it's also, from my understanding, is this I guess there's not a real clear thing here. Is this a dream? Is this something he's truly seeing? How did you ever look at that?
It has to be some sort of dream or hallucination. But one of the interesting things about it is the story overall. Now that we're being introduced to Ego and everything that's being set up, I'm trying to put it exactly. Oh, the story here works, but I feel like Alfred may have intentionally been left out because
Oh,
the
for sure.
story might not work as well if Alfred's there. Because then Alfred could have potentially intervened. And I think the story requires Bruce to really be going through all of this on his own.
And I think we do see another like manservant later in the story, and it is not Alfred. So I think that Alfred could have very easily snapped him out of this, and him being out of the Batcave, it had to have been intentional. It definitely did. But I really like how Ego goes on, and he basically says, I will show you pain, right? He goes on and says, he gives him a picture or shows him a picture. And we actually see that picture then, of Bruce and Thomas and Martha, and then their skeletons. And he talks about, just like Snibbs, everything is dead. Everything is dead. And he tries to escape it. And we see this like beautiful, like, I don't know the way to describe it. It's beautiful greens. It's very flat in art to a point where you're supposed to look at it. But then when I'm assuming that Darwyn Cooke did his own coloring, because I didn't see a colorist.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't see a colorist mentioned in here. But when it's flat, it's flat. But then he adds in these beautiful bright colors, and you see exactly what Ego is, and that he won't be dismissed. You have to reckon with this before you can move on. And he is, as much as Bruce calls him Batman, he's fear. Yeah. He is everything that fear is. And it looks like, and this was another part that confused me a little bit. He says he was born with the gift of Zorro on Christmas Eve. That Christmas. That very last Christmas before his parents' death. Would it make more sense to look at it and go, Ego was born when they were actually killed? What about that Zorro action figure brings up Ego's existence? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think what the point there is he's trying to present it to Bruce as, this is what, like, I was born from this moment that gave you that, like, that, like, id that I really into this Zorro character and these good and just ideas, and then was molded through like the death of his parents, like, corrupted that and
right.
transformed that, but it existed after receiving that gift of Zorro. Seems to be I think what they were going for.
And then kind of it transformed, because that was the movie playing on the screen that they went and seen. And and then we get a good flashback, and Martha gets the pearls that Martha is so famous for having. And and this is kind of where we see the different servant, which again is a little weird to me, but it makes sense. You can't have Alfred in this story. He would pop Bruce back into the right mind. But Thomas gets pulled away. And I really, really like these little moments that Darwyn adds in, is the flashbacks. Because Bruce is just a little boy. He doesn't understand human emotion. And we get a really cute, like, well, you gave Mom a wonderful gift and she cried. Like, yeah son, you'll realize that's a good thing when you're older. You're like, yes. I love those little, like, innocence of childhood he still shows in Bruce.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's so sweet. But quickly, Bruce, he gets left behind in the car, and he's doing, he's playing with his action figure. He's in the Indy 500, and he gets bored and he goes inside. And we actually see this is kind of where he has his first real any interaction with death, at least to our understanding.
Yeah.
And he is an older man, but he kind of explains it, and this prompts that conversation that a lot of kids have with their parents is, are you gonna die? And Thomas, as a healer, is going to, of course, you can't make grandiose promises that you cannot keep, but he says, of course, not until our time, without actually realizing the promise that he makes. So then we get Bruce back in bed, and this is where we actually get Ego come back into this flashback, right? And he says, I was there with you, faceless, nameless. And he was there the entire time. And then I absolutely love, and I want to make sure I show this panel. I've never seen this scene. I've seen this scene 100 times, right? Everybody has the crime alley scene. But the way that it looks through the gun is so unique to me. I absolutely love the way that Darwyn Cooke shows with the barrel of the gun and everything else. It is so pretty.
Yes.
So then
it's fantastic.
Then we are back into the to present time, and we get a better explanation as to why Ego is there, right? And he says you prefer to call me Batman. I am Fear. I guess I got a little ahead of myself earlier. Sorry, guys. And I live within you. And he talks about how this is such, for a while it was really good. We got to be together and induce rage, and we shared it. And then, for lack of a better word, his ego got in the way. Him wanting to be somebody famous or the celebrity of it all. I never looked at Batman personally as wanting to be a celebrity. Have you?
No, I don't think that's the intention, but it's an interesting point to bring up, because on the one hand, it's like, he's just doing this to fight crime, but it's like on the other hand, he is constantly talked about in Gotham. So it's an interesting idea to play with.
It definitely is. Like, I think since, we're looking at more like a couple years into it, like I said earlier, year 3, he would be a celebrity. Even if he was like this urban legend, he would still be a celebrity. People would still be going out there trying to get, pictures, or there would definitely be paparazzi for Batman.
Oh, for sure. Mm-hmm.
So we move on and we get them talking a little bit more, right? And he said you wanted, companionship. And I love this part where he absolutely, when it comes to Robin, he shuts him down.
Yeah.
It's so good. Like, he's like, I will not even discuss this. Like, there's no way. So he goes on and he talks about, I do like the idea, and I don't necessarily know that this would be the setting to explore it, but I like the idea of exploring the idea that Batman's presence created these super villains. I don't think there's any real good stories exploring that I can think of off the top of my head.
I'd have to think a little bit. I'm sure there's some out there. I just have to, think about it. I mean, the notion goes back to, that whole bit from Batman '89 of you made me, I made you first, like that whole bit. So I can see where you draw that from, but I'm sure. I'm trying to think if there's examples specifically like we're talking about before this comic, but I'd have to rack my brain a bit on it.
I like the idea, though. I think it could be a really cool concept if somebody was able to deliver it correctly and kind of do like a butterfly effect. Like, what if it was different. I think it would be worth looking into, like, as a storyline. It would have to be Elseworld, of course, right? But it would be very interesting to look at. But he talks about the extremeness of the criminals. We've got, reference, and without even again saying their names, we've got Catwoman, we've got Penguin, we've got Hugo Strange again, and Scarecrow. But there's one. There's always one that is going to be the worst. And that is, the idea that with Joker, they are going to eventually have to enact some sort of justice. They are eventually going to have to take a stand. And Joker has killed a lot of people. And there's a lot of people, like, even when I've done videos in the past where I'm like, Batman has a strict no kill rule. This isn't something that I want to see, maybe Zack Snyder's version of Batman be a murderer, talking about something specifically. But there's a lot of people that are like, look, if he were to kill the Joker, if he were to kill Victor Zsasz, this would help a lot. But then again, you're going against everything that character is. And that's kind of what they're exploring here. They really are exploring the idea of Bruce is just getting, buried in different skulls of people that have passed on the hands of Joker. And he created Joker. And this is what I meant earlier. This is like right out of the animated series. This Joker storyboard. Well, it's not a storyboard. It's a comic book panel, but it's like a storyboard for the animated series.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so well done, but he essentially created the Joker. And he's got to, if there's justice, and it's a weird way to think about it, because, like, if there is going to be justice for all of his victims, should there not be justice for the person that was before Joker fell into the vat of acid? Do you understand what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And that's kind of where they go back and forth, and they talk about Joker, and if they are going to enact justice. And I love this panel because we just see Bruce start laughing, and I had to Google what this meant. I didn't realize, so this was made 22 years ago. And even if you look at stuff like, what is it called? Where he says overdone potato. Oh my gosh, I'll think of it. I had to look up what that meant. I had no idea what an underdone potato meant. When he calls him I was like, did I miss something? Is this a cultural reference? Like, I was so confused.
Mm-hmm.
But, okay, Scrooge, that's what it's from. I couldn't think of what it is. Christmas Carol, yeah. And I was so confused what it meant, but he literally laughs in his face. And I actually really like that. I don't know if maybe it's my age or just not knowing the Christmas Carol well, but I think it's very easy to find out what that reference is. But the idea that he's able to laugh at him is pretty awesome too. So, we see basically, him saying, you swore to your parents, to me, that you would dedicate your life to this crusade. And kind of a little bit of a fight back and forth. He's saying, but if you turn your back on me. And I think this is kind of where I notice, like, the Sigmund Freud stuff. We've got the ego that is the conscious self. And I think it's kind of cool how he named him after the actual ego, because is Batman more Batman than Bruce Wayne is Bruce Wayne? You know what I mean? Like, which one is the secret identity? And looking at it from ego is like your logical mind, right?
Yeah.
So his logical mind in this instance is kind of telling him, yeah, you need to get rid of the Joker.
Yeah.
And I really like it. I really do. But he starts giving him like these ultimatum. If you turn your back on me, this is what's going to happen to your so-called life. You know, we get kind of like a gold digger and golf and different people. And the last one almost looks like Talia. I was kind of wondering if that's what they were going for. But he ends up with saying, you know, you're breaking my heart. I would love to see this animated. Like, I really would. Yeah. That line alone, I can just, honestly, it's weird, but I can picture in my head like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, and another thing I want to point out is the way that, you know, fear is basically done throughout this, the way the Batman is confronting Bruce, the mouth and everything, it's very reminiscent of Clayface from the animated series.
Oh, I didn't even notice that. You're right.
Yeah.
I totally yeah. It's been a long time. I love that show, but it's been a long time since I watched it.
Sure.
But yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. And he says, you know, I've had enough of this madness. And he says, I'll show you madness. If you if you denounce me, if you get rid of the Batman, basically, and you try to jam me back into your subconscious, I promise I will wake you up screaming every single night of your pitiful life.
Yeah.
So if he gets rid of Batman and tries to just be Bruce Wayne, he will be much more miserable. Like, this is kind of like cementing this was what he was meant to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, sure. He says, you're right. You know, we have to basically come to an agreement. Both, you know, my Batman side and my Bruce Wayne side. We have to come to this agreement for those I failed to protect. What can we do to carry on from here? And he gives them this idea. And this is another idea I could see explored in an Elseworld story. We've done a lot of evil Superman. Like, we've done a lot of evil Superman. Scott Snyder knows how to do evil Batman. But sure, this could be another really cool idea of having almost them being two different conscious bodies, where similar to Harvey Dent. And that's the example he uses. You know, Harvey, once that acid was thrown in his face, he became Harvey Dent and Two-Face. Well, two different ideas. He's obsessed with the binary, right? Yeah. And that is actual. And I love, like, how he has, when he shows Harvey Dent in full, he's got double featured Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Like, those little things Darwyn Cooke added into the art are so phenomenal to me. Like, the original dual personality he adds in there. And he actually even has a panel that looks very similar to something of the, well, actually a couple. I didn't even realize it because when I reread it, I was doing it on my phone, and yeah, he plays with that idea of that two different personalities in his art style throughout this whole entire 9-page spread. And he says, you know, basically you do Bruce Wayne. But I'll take over Batman. You let me at the, you know, wheel, and you don't have to answer to what I do. You just let me take over. You just let me have it, and you can, you know, do your Wayne Foundation stuff. You can, Joker, I'll take care of. And he's like, no, no, you want me to put myself in like this self-induced, psychosis, the psychotic break, like push myself to the edge where I have to induce this myself. And he kind of pushes back against the idea. And he says, I've tempered with your wrath, but your revenge, if I made this deal, what you would do would be monstrous, right? You would be uncontrollable.
What I think is also interesting here on page 59, when Bruce is like holding the gun and they're having that back and forth and he's got to make that decision. We didn't get to see Buster Snibbs' face before he kills himself with the gun. Now we do. Because when Bruce is considering it and thinking over his options, we get the one panel in that grid of Buster Snibbs with the gun to his head, and he looks terrified.
Right.
Like he didn't, like ultimately you can tell he's petrified of what he's about to do, which feeds into Bruce's decision. And I think that's done excellently here and in a way where there's no pandering to the audience. They're not talking down to you. It's very, it's very, very subtle, blink if you miss it kind of moment, but it's really sweet that you get to sort of see, maybe sweet's the wrong word, but, it's very, it's like touching to it that you get to see that and you really see Bruce grappling with it in that way.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree. I like the way that they did it off camera or off panel, rather, to show you eventually and to kind of have that moment where it does pay off and it shows what a terrifying experience and what went through Buster's mind during that. And you can kind of see it on the face. You know what I mean? Like you can feel those emotions, not just through him, but what he was thinking about with his family, with his child, with what he was going to go on to. And I really, really like that. And Darwyn Cooke does a really good job of showing a prevailing emotion, whereas a lot of times you don't necessarily, like there's some artists that are phenomenal artists, but you don't get that emotion. He's both. Yeah. And this shows in this book 100%. So we get to this decision. You leave us no choice, right? Ego makes him kind of this offer, and he gives him his own, kill me. You got to kill me. If you want to move on, you got to kill me. And he gives him the gun and he says, use it. And he almost does. He's I love the look when he says, free yourself. Like, this is why this needs to be animated. It's so good. The emotions, you can just feel like the kind of how he, talks to him demeaning and how he acts. And I think it's a really good job. So he says, free me. And he won't. He absolutely won't. And he says, basically they come to an understanding, right? The truth hurts. Yeah, you have to come to this understanding. Not only is Batman fear for these people, and I love this, because usually we look at Superman and he's very aspirational of a hero. You can read stuff like All-Star Superman and always feel out, coming at the end of that book, feeling like $1 million. Yeah. But sometimes Batman's not the same.
Oh, for sure.
And I love the way he says Batman is fear, but he's also hope to those that need him. And I thought that was probably one of the strongest messages Darwyn could put in, because we don't look at Batman as super hopeful, but he still is. He still is to those that need him. And you even see it written across, the little girl's face, or I think she's a little girl. The woman's face, we'll say. And this, I wish with this story, it would have been a little bit more back and forth here, because he says, real quickly, he says, if you can live with that, then Bruce Wayne can live with the responsibilities. And very quickly they agree. I wish there would have been a little bit more back and forth because it felt like after all of this buildup, it was very easily resolved. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I wish we would have got a little bit more of like, okay, here's your terms, here's my terms. Okay, well, we're gonna maybe the best way to do is to end it quickly, but it felt like Ego gave in easier than I wish he would have, if that makes sense.
No, I get what you're saying.
But so Ego disappears, and he kind of explodes into this bat crazy lightness, and we see one picture again, one very familiar picture float into Bruce Wayne's hand, and we don't actually see what it is yet, but there is again another Joker, at a nightclub, basically taking people hostage, and they don't think Bruce is gonna show, or Batman is gonna show rather, and he shows up and he goes through and he's like, I was getting worried, right? Gordon was getting worried, and he's like, something did happen, Commissioner, but I managed to come away from it in one piece. And he's like, I'm not sure I followed. Yeah, I don't think anyone would follow that, but it stands to the audience. So I love the picture. The picture we were just talking about is put on the Batmobile's front desk. I think it is very symbolic of like, every time he steps in that Batmobile, he is reminded of his humanity.
Yeah.
He's reminded of Bruce Wayne. And it's not the skeleton picture, thankfully. But he does end out, looking at that and saying, I'm on my way. That is a perfect way to kind of balance, what grounds Bruce is that moment in his life that he had with his parents. That moment, before then that was taken on Christmas, right? So that moment before the insanity, everything he learned from his father and from his mother. And I think it's a way to really balance them out. The only problem I see with that when I look at it logically is if someone were to get near the Batmobile, they would know who Batman was very quickly. Like, they would be able to figure out who he was.
Well, sure.
So overall, this is probably, I would say this is one of those stories that, as a Batman fan, is a must read. Like,
yeah, no, for sure.
It's like up there with Long Halloween. It's up there with the classic stories. But I did want to talk and pick your brain a little bit and see how you thought this could relate to the live action. The Pattinson movie coming up.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say I didn't see the most recent trailer, but I saw the other ones. I'm sure I'm going to end up seeing this opening night. I can see a few things they could do with this. They could sort of tie in, maybe the flashback to Christmas. I could see that appearing in the movie, and sort of pulling on the audience's heartstrings with some of those moments. And another thing I could easily see is, not that this would be the point of the movie, but you could have that kind of moment where maybe he is confronting himself and it looks kind of demonic. And that could be interesting. Kind of like in Batman v Superman, when Ben Affleck had like that dream. There were a couple of moments like that where it would like cut to him having like a bad dream or seeing like that monstrous bat or the well scene again. Like I could see them kind of doing something similar to that with this, with that version of, with the whole ego bit and then the Christmas bit. I think those are the two big things from this that I could see them really pulling from for this movie.
Well, and if you look at that, I think it was the original trailer where he's taking off his cowl, and I know a lot of people were calling him like emo looking with his eyes. That could be something like, you could be looking at him very young in his career as Batman, wrestling with the idea of Bruce Wayne and Batman. And no, you're totally fine. Sorry. And having them be two separate entities. And we've heard rumors that he's not interested as much in the Playboy philanthropist as he is Batman. And they could have that little bit of wrestle with his psyche and how he's going to go forward. I know we did have Matt Reeves a while back say this was something that inspired him. I don't think we're ever going to see like an ego in live action. I don't mean that. But I can see the wrestling with how to move forward, with his code, with his memories. And I can also see Alfred being absent. And the only reason I say that is because I don't know if you read The Imposter by Mattinson Townsend.
I haven't yet, but no. Yeah.
Well, I won't spoil anything, but it is written by the same person. Yeah. And I can see the aesthetic very similar. I can see a lot. You know how you can just read a story and tell that it was, the influences. And you can tell it was influenced. And you can tell there is going to be a mental health aspect to it. And I think that is a smart way to go about Bruce Wayne in a realistic standpoint. Because in reality, if Bruce Wayne exists and he was jumping around buildings dressed as a bat, nobody would think that man was sane. So you might have to prove it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I hear you.
Yeah, and I think it's going. I'm really excited for the movie. I think they're drawing on a lot more elements than just this, and I'm going to cover those eventually. But I definitely think that I can see where they're going without having to dive too deep into it. And I think with what we saw with the Joker movie did a great job with mental health. I just hope they're not rehashing the same thing, because you've also got rumors that the Waynes are going to be more corrupt than they would be in the they're not going to be their, super parents. So I can see where they're going. I just hope that the way to connect the dots isn't necessarily like, how do I say this nicely? Because I am looking forward to the movie. It isn't necessarily like spitting on what Batman is in the comics. You've got the no-kill rule. You've got certain things that make him his character. And I definitely think those things absolutely have to be at the forefront.
For sure. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for going through this with me. I know it's a long book, but it's absolutely worth a read. You guys definitely need to check out Ego, and make sure you guys check out, oh my gosh, I want to call it Berserk. Beckstar.
Yeah.
Berserk. I was just setting up I apologize. I was just setting up an interview with Matt Kent. So I'm like, Berserk is coming to my head. No. But yes, you're fine. Beckstar. Make sure you guys check out Beckstar and Ego. Yes, definitely Ego. It is absolutely worth your read. Thank you again so much, Joe.
Yes, no, thank you for having me.
I appreciate it. We will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I'm more than just a picture. I'm a daughter and a sister.